Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages. Now, this morning I was having a conversation with someone about OCD, the coach that I'm working with. I'm in her mastermind, and so we were talking about OCD symptoms this morning, and I realized that there is so much to this topic that I want to bring you all that it just needs its own episode. So just a heads up as far as what this episode is going to be about. It's going to be about trauma symptoms. It's going to be about OCD. It's also going to involve pelvic floor therapy, my experience with all things pelvic floor, and maybe it'll go in some other directions. We'll see. But that's the gist. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what's coming up in this episode. The other thing that I need to mention is that I explain some thought forms in this episode. I'm recording this little snippet after I've already recorded the whole thing that go really in depth into my thoughts and my compulsions and my obsessions and everything. And so if you are going to latch on to the obsessions and the compulsions that I outlined in this episode, don't listen to this. Don't listen to this. If you know you're like that, if you already have health anxiety, if you already have that downward spiral, please spare yourself, because I'm being really honest in this episode and I talk about some really personal medical stuff and health things that I've experienced. If you're fascinated, proceed. If this is neutral for you, proceed. But if you are going to glom on to the obsessive elements that I outline here and that I detail, I just wouldn't listen to this episode. I honestly don't even think it's worth it. So yeah, that's your disclaimer. The other thing, we have Cosmic Council coming up and we have Apex coming up. Those are the two big things that I want to remind you of. Cosmic Council is a 3-week program all about guides. We're going to be working with over 9 guides. There's 9 core ones, and then I'm also going to be showing you how to shop for guides and how I pick them and how I receive them and everything like that. So it is so much fun, hands down my funnest class. And so if you are interested, make sure you check that out. The link is in the description box. And I want to make sure that I have a good mix, a good variety of times for multiple time zones. And so you will be sent a link as soon as you sign up. And that's where you can submit like the days and times that work for you. You also get the Connect to Source meditation. You need to be familiar with that before class starts so you can dive in right away. And it gives you the Zoom link and all of the nitty-gritty details. So that is available now. Apex, 2-month intensive with me, designed to get you into peak performance, peak mental, emotional, spiritual condition. That is on for the fall round, October 1st to November 30th. That's the time that we're going to be in the container together. Applications close as soon as it's full or on September 30th, whichever one comes first, and there is a firm cutoff date for that. So if you are interested in getting into a really, really deep container, it is like a big fat reset button. It is going to take you to the next level for 2023 for sure. Then make sure you hop inside. It is my favorite container. It is like my pride and joy. And so it is something that I strongly feel people should do at least once in their lifetime. If I could have it my way, everyone would do Apex at least once because it is that impactful. And it's one of those things where you can't unsee peak performance. Like once you've seen it, once you've witnessed it, once you've felt it in your body, there is something about that that really shakes up how you live your life. So anyway, that is the fun stuff that we have coming up. Check all of that out. Again, all of the links will be in the description box or the show notes, and I will see you all inside. All right, so let's dive in. Now, where we need to start in order for the pelvic floor thing to make sense is we need to back all the way up to when I initially left home when I was 17. So, of course, traumatic childhood, nervous system all jacked up, really high stress life, and I also overloaded myself with work in college in order to maintain that level of stress. Now, what I would call health anxiety originally, it just started as health anxiety, happened when I was in college. And the reason why this even came up was because I started getting ulcers on my tonsils. So as soon as that started to happen, it opened up like the floodgates for what initially was health anxiety. That's how it started. Just this fixation on what if something is wrong with me? What if? Now, at this point in time, I'm not doing anything actively to fix the anxiety. I'm just managing it. It was one of those things that wasn't bad enough or severe enough to get my attention, really, or feel like I needed to go get help, seek a practitioner, and do something about it. It wasn't severe enough to the point where it was negatively impacting my life. So in 2017, there were a few really significant triggers that happened in my life that opened up the floodgates for trauma. Just all of these symptoms. I had a laundry list of different symptoms that were a result of childhood trauma, basically. Just all of this stuff. It was presenting in so many different ways. And OCD was something that had started that summer. So what started as health anxiety ended up turning into, what if I have breast cancer? And if I have breast cancer, there's going to be a doctor who's going to tell me that I need a mastectomy. And there's absolutely no way I'll get a mastectomy. My fear of breast cancer ended up turning into compulsive breast exams. So I would sit for hours and hours and hours and hours, I'm not joking, where I would constantly feel my breasts, like give myself a breast exam nonstop for hours. It was so bad to the point where, and obviously I'm not like laying down and making it all formal the way you would have a breast exam at a doctor, but it was more of, I was just continually pressing my breast tissue to see if there was a lump. I was constantly checking. And to the point where it was so bad, I would do it in public. I would do it in front of people, where I would just sit there and check 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 the entire time. I could not stop. So when I got into therapy in November is when I started with a new therapist. It opened up about 3.5 years of doing consistent work with him. And his approach, he was like, let's just put all of this into one category and let's call it all nervous system dysregulation. Wise man, wise choice. That was a wise thing to do as a practitioner. Is just, yeah, we get it. Let's put it all under the umbrella of, this is a nervous system issue and it's presenting as a whole bunch of different things. The OCD is just one way that it's showing up. Cool. And for quite some time, that was pretty effective. Like taking the approach of it, we don't even need to call it anything. It is just nervous system. Just focus on the nervous system, regulate. Doing that for years did get it under control. It got to the point where it was manageable. I had achieved this point where I could maintain my balance. I could maintain my regulation. I could have thoughts without getting sucked into them, so I considered that to be successful. And the other thing that happened in the summer of 2019 was I started doing breast massage. And when I started doing breast massage, for whatever reason, something happened where I started thinking, well, because there's so much circulation and blood flow in my tissue now, my breast tissue now, there's no possible way that I will ever get breast cancer. And that whole process that I went through, for whatever reason, it completely nipped that angle of my OCD. And to this day, ever since that thought entered my mind and my personal theory about circulation landed and was anchored in, I have not feared breast cancer since. So once again, I feel like I'm hot shit. I'm on the top of the world. However, a new angle emerged. So at some point, I don't remember where it was, but it was around the time that I had figured out the breast thing, the breast tissue thing, the breast cancer thing, that angle of my OCD. I had put the last nail in that coffin. And at some point at the end of that, I got a very minor vaginal infection. And I think for any normal person, it would be like, oh, that's not a big deal at all. You know, just this energy of it's no big deal. And my rational mind knows it's not a big deal. Like, whether it's a UTI or a yeast infection or whatever it is, like those types of things in my mind, if you ask me, I'm going to tell you, no, those things are not a big deal. But what ended up happening this particular time is I started having this really intense fear about going to the doctor. So previously, this happened in my early 20s, where if I got a UTI, I knew how to correct it. I know what to take. I know what to do. There's no need for me to intervene with antibiotics. I can take care of it myself. And at this point in time, I was like, you know what? I think I can fix this on my own, because I would rather run an experiment on myself than go see a doctor. Because at this point in time, just for some context on this, I've had some pretty traumatic gynecologist appointments. So now I'm sure you can imagine my distrust and terror and absolute rage toward all things gynecology. I'm not saying that's a good energy to hold in my body or belief systems to have. Of course not. But at this point in time, it was like I would rather die. I would rather die than go to the gynecologist. And I mean that. So in order to avoid the evil gynecologist's office, I'm just kidding. I don't really feel that way. But at the time, it's that level of fear coursing through my body. I decided I was going to try to handle it myself, which, promptly blew up in my face. I started having even more bizarre symptoms. So then it got to the point where it was so out of control that I did have to go to the doctor. And it was like, there's no avoiding this. I literally cannot fix this on my own. And I can't keep having these symptoms indefinitely. So I ended up finding a doctor, not a regular MD, okay? It was a integrative doctor that I found who I explained very clearly my trauma around all things gynecology, all things vaginas, and I made it very clear that I wanted to choose my own labs. I wanted to have full control over my treatment and what we do. And I was just very adamant about that. And she ended up being really cool. We didn't need to do any invasive procedures. She didn't tell me that I needed something that I didn't actually need, which is what happened to me previously. And I was able to do all of my labs at home, which was a really big deal to me. We get everything fixed. My vagina is back to normal. All is well. All is good. And do you know what makes a reappearance? My old faithful OCD. All things sexual organs is typically how the OCD manifests for me. But this time it starts it starts showing up as compulsively checking my vagina. I don't know how else to put it. That's how it wanted to show up. So it would turn into, I was constantly looking for any type of sensation that I needed to go to the bathroom. I would go to the bathroom and check. So this led to a whole host of problems that I did not know was going to happen, but I was training my bladder to do things that it's not supposed to do. So I constantly had this really intense sensation that I needed to pee because now my pelvic floor is way out of balance. And at the time, I didn't realize what was happening. But I'm going to the bathroom because it's being driven by this obsession with what if I have an infection? What if something is wrong? What if something is off? What if? Then I'm compulsing. So I'm checking, I'm freaking out, I'm continually checking. I can't stop checking. And keep in mind, this is after I literally have numbers. I have lab work. I have a doctor who has explained all of this to me. It's like I've done all of the checking that there is to do. As a matter of fact, I have lab work to prove it. I have all of these things that to a normal person should restore peace and balance within your system. It should be like, okay, you have answered the question that you originally posed. That is not how this works. And keep in mind, this is also at a point in time when my nervous system is pretty regulated now. Like I'm in balance. I'm feeling good for the most part. And this is still happening. So one of the things that I feel is important to introduce here is this is something that I didn't realize was a thing, but I already intuitively knew that all of my OCD symptoms, the reason why they present the way they do is because of a singular core fear. And I didn't realize this was actually a discussion that people were having about OCD until I had a conversation about it with Chelsea this morning or a week ago or whenever we talked about it. So basically, it's the idea that all roads lead to Rome. That's kind of how it is, at least for me and my symptoms. Anytime OCD comes up for me, it revolves around one fear that I will be rejected or I will not be able to have a romantic relationship in my life. So everything that orbits this symptom goes back to, well, if this is true, if this happens, then I'm going to get rejected or I'm not going to be able to have a normal sex life. This is why the fear of having breast cancer, originally it was like, well, if I lose my boobs, that was a really big deal for me. Because for me, if you tell me I will never have love, well, that's death. That's the same thing. They're not different. You're never going to have love. You're never going to have a romantic relationship. That is a death sentence for me. So if you were in sub and you listened to an unconventional love story, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so all of these symptoms are about that. It was checking my vagina because maybe if something is wrong, then I won't be able to function in a normal relationship or I won't have a normal sex life. And this, of course, I'm sure you can imagine, this has led to a lot of neuroticism and obsession about my sexual health as well, which, I mean, in some ways is a blessing in the sense that my neuroticism and obsession and compulsions will prevent me from engaging in any type of high-risk sexual behavior. But for most other things, that is absolutely not helpful in any way. Let's not forget that it's the same as when I would give myself continual breast exams for hours and hours and hours. that I was bruising myself, experiencing pain, and then saying, oh no, I'm having pain, so that means something is wrong. Well, the same thing was happening downstairs, where it was, well, I keep checking myself. Now I'm irritated. Now I'm experiencing pain. And so then I'm saying, well, there's pain, so something's wrong. So it was this circular experience that was absolutely maddening. And even though I could tell you, I know I'm experiencing this because I've been giving myself an 8-hour breast exam today, or because I will not stop touching myself and checking, and I know it's irritating me. I could tell you that and know that, and it would not stop the compulsion. I could not stop it. It did feel like it was completely out of my control. Another way this would show up was fear of going bald. So I was constantly obsessing over what my part looked like, what my hairline looked like. I couldn't stop focusing on it. I couldn't stop touching it. I couldn't stop checking it all the time. And once again, why am I afraid of going bald? Well, I'm afraid of going bald because that might mean that I'll never be in a romantic relationship. And if that happens, that's death. I don't know exactly when the hair thing calmed down, but it did eventually. But then I started, for the vagina fears in particular, I decided I was going to take the same approach that I did with the breast massage and take the same circulation approach that I did there. So I started doing pelvic floor massage. I started learning a lot about the pelvic floor. I started, doing all of these different things to increase blood flow, to give myself that mental satisfaction of, okay, I'm experiencing more circulation. I have healthy cells. Like, I'm doing my best to just organize it in my mind in a way that brings me some relief. Now, when I was working with the therapist I referred to, who just took a straight up, we're going to call this a nervous system issue and that's it, he at a certain point advised that occasionally I could get reality checks. And that entails basically asking someone to reflect back to me what their truth about the situation. So for some time it was my grandmother, because she's a nurse, and so I would talk to her about health stuff, and I would ask her questions, and I would ask her, what's okay, what's normal, what's not. And so entertaining that, I won't say it's wrong, because I know that at a certain point and during particular phases of my healing, that was really helpful to get that positive or neutral reflection that everything's okay, and so that I'm not just completely trapped in my own mind. But of course, I also had the understanding and awareness that you can just as easily get sucked into compulsion around asking. So that's the other tricky thing about all of this, is anything can be compulsive, including things that you're calling solutions. So if something gives you temporary relief, the same way I might experience a split second of relief if I check my breasts or I check my vagina or whatever compulsive behavior is going on. But then 2 seconds later, it's like, well, did you miss something? What if something happened in the last 0.2 seconds? What if there's now a sore there that you just don't know is there? What if there is something there and you just don't know that it's there? This is what my mind is tormenting me with. So anyway, between nervous system regulation, knowing and understanding what's happening, so like understanding the mechanics of what's going on with my brain, doing the breast massage, the pelvic floor massage, just general lifestyle changes, I did experience a great level of improvement. Now, when I was in the thick of it, only on like the only if it was like a 911, I need someone else to reflect this to me, then I might ask for a reality check. But all of those things combined actually got me in a pretty good position. And understanding also treating it like a trauma symptom was pretty effective for a while. So I really started to get a handle on this in 2020. I was in a really good position. 2021, I would have an occasional flare-up, but for the most part, I considered it managed. I considered it to not be something that was tormenting me. It's not a huge part of my life. It's more of there's just occasional flare-ups, which I think that's like a goal. If there's a goal for OCD, I think that saying you should never ever have a symptom pop up ever again, I think that that's too tall of an order. But saying you're just going to have this for the rest of your life, that's bullshit as well. So anyway, for the most part, I was feeling really good. And it was the experience of just feeling like there's nothing to fix here. There's nothing more to work on, because that's how great I'm feeling. Then what ended up happening is I wasn't having OCD symptoms. I was having actual symptoms, like actual pain. And I really could not figure out what it was. And this is particularly difficult when we get into experiencing pain, because you only experience pain in your mind. That's the weird thing about pain. No two people experience it in the same way. So this is what's so interesting about something like back pain. You can take two people who have back x-rays. One person's spine looks jacked up, like they shouldn't even be able to walk, and the other person has a perfectly normal, healthy looking spine. The normal looking spine could be the person who's in severe pain. It is entirely experienced in the mind. And the other thing is, pain is not always an indication that something has gone wrong with your physical body or there is some actual damage. So I was in the position where I'm like, okay, is this me fixating? Is this me being paranoid? Is this a compulsion that is causing this, or is this legitimate pain? And the symptom that started to show up last year was, the only way I can describe it is it felt like itching. But I knew that it wasn't an infection, because I even got more labs done just to rule it out. It wasn't an infection. I'm celibate. It's not an STD. There were every logical explanation I could give pointed to this is in my head. So eventually I get the ping that I need to look for a pelvic floor physical therapist. I was like, that's it. I'm experiencing pain. There is discomfort, and it's discomfort that I've never heard anyone else describe. I've never heard someone describe it's itching, but not like a yeast infection, not like that. It's weird internal itching that makes me feel like I want to put pressure on it. So now what is actually me experiencing pain and then wanting to relieve the pain, I can't tell if that's a compulsive behavior that is being driven by my obsession, or if this is legitimate, there's something going on. So anyway, I go to a pelvic floor physical therapist back in May. We start working together. What I ended up discovering doing pelvic floor physical therapy was that all of the OCD compulsions, the compulsion part of the equation, resulted in some pretty, I don't want to call it severe, but it was pelvic floor dysfunction was the result of the compulsions that I was having. So all of the times when I was going to the bathroom to check, even if I didn't need to go to the bathroom, or every time that I was pressing down and trying to press into my pelvic floor, every time that I was freaking out and avoiding the area, all of that was leading to a lot of stress and a lot of pain and a lot of tension in the pelvic floor. So the way my physical therapist described it to me was basically there's not enough blood flow, there's not enough circulation happening here, and there's not enough relaxation to the point where your nerves are now sending you signals that are saying itch. This is an itching sensation. Now, what else was true for me, the other bizarre symptom that I was having was anytime I used like a cervical wand, if you've ever seen like a crystal wand, if I were to use one of those, this was a long time ago, I would experience the itching sensation internally, like all the way in the back of my pelvic floor, it would feel itchy. And I told my physical therapist, I'm like, I never thought that was normal, but who the hell am I going to describe this weird sensation to? Now, the other interesting thing about pelvic floor physical therapy in particular, and this was explained to me the first day I was there, is they took a detailed medical history and everything is considered trauma to the pelvic floor. What I mean by that is any infection, childbirth, surgery, medical procedure, having a traumatic experience at the gynecologist, all of that is put into the category of pelvic floor trauma. I'm not sure if all pelvic floor physical therapists will agree with this approach because, of course, different people are trained by different philosophies, and I'm sure there's a lot of variability when it comes to this type of work. What I will say, and I didn't know this until a couple months in, but the place where I've been going is like world renowned. And they actually specialize in people who have experienced medical trauma, because a lot of the reason why people actually seek out this type of physical therapy is for bladder issues. So if you've been sucked into thinking that you have chronic UTIs, you're on an endless trail of antibiotics and there's no improvement in your symptoms, but you still feel like you have to pee, and that's the thing that is driving you to the doctor. They deal with a lot of people who are experiencing bladder issues or incontinence, different things like that. And it's like the last stop. It's like the last solution that they have. And so, of course, I didn't realize this. This isn't the first thing that is advertised, obviously. But from an energetic standpoint, it completely makes sense that I would call in practitioners who have compatible philosophies with myself in terms of bedside manner and taking an emotional, mental, spiritual approach, just taking that holistic, everything needs to be kept in mind when it comes to medical treatment, in my opinion. So it was very refreshing for me to get treatment from this place. Now, there were a whole bunch of things that I really started to have breakthroughs around while getting treated, just in terms of where I'm holding tension in my body, whether that be my posture, my lower back, my hips, because all of that is connected to the pelvic floor. It's like there are so many different things that can influence it. And so it made me more attentive to those other areas, as well as my emotional state. You know, if I'm having a high anxiety day, that is directly correlated with the amount of pain that I experience. And so there's all sorts of different things that started to come through. And I even started to make the connection between receptivity and the pelvic floor. Because you can imagine if you're really, really tightened up and experiencing a lot of pain, your level of receptivity is not going to be what it might normally be. Because I was so on top of my exercises, and this is something that every practitioner will tell you. If you give me something to implement, if you give me homework, if you give me an assignment, I will do it. It will be done. I'm on top of all of that because I know that if you put something into practice, you're going to get results faster. And for me, I want to go fast. So I started doing all of my exercises religiously. I was on top of everything. I was going to weekly appointments. Good. I was just on this positive trajectory with all things pelvic floor, feeling amazing, massive reduction in symptoms. And even when I was having, let's say, an OCD flare-up, or I would have a lot of stress, and I would, because obviously my physical therapist knew that the OCD was driving a lot of these problems, I thought that having her check, having her give me a reality check, having her tell me that my body is okay and that my vagina is totally normal, that would bring me relief, as it would any normal, sane, rational person. At the beginning of August, I'm going to jump around a little bit here, my obsession started to bounce around between a few different things. And Chelsea put it in a really great way. She called it mind roulette, which is exactly what was happening, where it would bounce between an obsession about my relationship and my love life, my business I would obsess about, and then I would obsess about all things sexual health. So it would ping pong between all of those, depending on the day. And for a while, it was really, really focused on the relationship obsession, the relationship OCD. Now, that one just presents as basically interpreting everything as a red flag. In short, that's what the obsession is around is this a red flag? Is this a problem? Is this a problem? Is this a problem? Is this a bad sign? Does this mean it's not right? Am I missing something? That's the obsession. And it doesn't matter how many times someone tells me, no, that's totally good, fine, normal. I could get all the reality checks in the world. It will still be an obsession. This is about the time that I'm launching Sub. Okay, so I'm in the middle of that launch. So my business obsession is kicked up, the relationship stuff is kicked up, and the health OCD is like looming. The second call of Sub was the unconventional love story call, where I tell a very, very intimate story just about my love life. The night before that call, I had the most profound relationship breakthroughs. It was hands down one of the best nights of my entire life with the man that I'm dating. It was just perfect timing on all accounts. Like it was such a massive confirmation that the work that I've done has been highly effective, that all of the fears and concerns and what ifs have absolutely no basis in reality. It was out of this world incredible. So I'm like having the time of my life, not to mention on the heels of that, I'm extremely stable. So my personal stability, which is my metric of success when it comes to all of this, is through the roof. It is unreal how exceptional all of this is going. At this same time, my business, I'm having huge breakthroughs about my business. I'm having all of this awareness, all of these ahas, just all of this good stuff is happening. So the last outlet is my sexual health. And for whatever reason, it came back with a vengeance. And I think some people would say that there's an underlying belief that if things are going really well, then something bad has to happen. That's never really been my problem. What this actually is is like the death rattle of my attachment trauma that basically just tries to have the last and final word about the danger and threat of loss of a relationship. Because that, again, that's what all of this revolves around, is the experience of being rejected. And so it's not that things are going really well and so now something bad has to even the scale. No, that's never been my issue. Let me also mention, I knew that it was really way more severe than it normally is when I did go to pelvic floor physical therapy. My physical therapist, I asked her to give me a reality check. Everything is fine. And I'm still distressed. So the fact that even having a fucking doctor inspect my anatomy, that is not enough to tame this obsession. Let me go ahead and round out this episode now that we're here. Because I understand that this episode has kind of been peaking, but it's like, what are you getting to? Like, what is the lead here? Where do we go from here? The first thing that I want to mention is that by no means am I beating myself up about this. I don't consider this to mean that I'm regressing or that, I'm back to square one. There's no negative self-talk around this. Is it comfortable? No. Do I love this position? Do I love that it's like the fixation is just so extreme? No, I don't love that. However, there are plenty of things that I do appreciate about this compared to a lot of other things. So I would rather be dealing with OCD than some of the other trauma symptoms that I've had. I would rather have OCD any day of the week than paranoia. My paranoia back when I was like in the thick of my healing, that was the worst symptom for me. That or stress vomiting. So first of all, the fact that I don't have either of those things, that's a win. The second thing that I want to mention is I can absolutely get this back into a place where I'm back to managing it in a way that feels really good and is harmonious with my life, to the point where I'm not experiencing symptoms every day. Lately, I've been in rumination and compulsion every single day. Now, even though this has been going on for a while, I'm aware of a couple of things. So the first one being that this is steering me in the direction of feeling more confident within my body, having more control over where I'm focusing and what I'm giving attention to. There's a lot of things that this is helping me to refine, so I'm not angry that I'm having this experience. It's just really uncomfortable in the moment. And Chelsea sent me a podcast episode, and one of the interesting things that this guy, Michael Greenberg, was saying was that OCD is an analytical issue. So it's not that you're having thoughts, it's that you're analyzing this and trying to answer a specific question and obsessing over answering the question that you're posing. That's the issue. So in the grand scheme of things, well, what does this provide? It is leading me to understand more how to disengage with a thought, how to have a thought without having to engage it, without having to answer the question that the thought has presented. So the interesting thing about this is the one symptom that I have not been able to correct with just straight up nervous system regulation, because nervous system regulation will carry you a great deal of the way. That is like the bulk. I would say if you just do that, if you do nothing else and you just do that, you will experience a radical improvement in many, many, many symptoms. For real. I stand by that. Absolutely. But for whatever reason, this particular issue has not been corrected with just nervous system regulation. It also hasn't been corrected with just exposure. Because the other thing that I have used for myself in order to kind of like desensitize myself to certain things has been exposure in conjunction with regulating my nervous system on the heels of that exposure to the thing that has frightened me. That does not work for OCD because everything that I'm already doing is kind of an exposure. I'm continually exposing myself to the thing that is creating the fear. I'm already doing that. So, for example, I know that I mentioned this on Instagram recently, that I used to be hysterical anytime I was sending a text message to the guy that I was interested in, that I'm still dating to this day. But early on, I would be hysterical. I would be in tears. I would have to have a friend on the phone with me while I sent a text message. And that was exposure therapy. Then I would come down off of that experience, get back into a regulated state, and then everything would be okay. And I just had to do that over and over and over and over until it was no longer activating at that level. So that is super effective in many ways. And there's so many things where that works. We're just bundling those two things together, not OCD. But because OCD is such a cerebral, analytical issue, it's like this thing that you continually do and you don't know how to stop. It just requires a different toolkit. So I am currently in process with that right now because there's some things that get really complicated when we're talking about your mental body, whether or not that improves something or makes it worse. And so a lot of the things that would normally bring someone peace or bring someone resolution actually inflame OCD. So it's a really counterintuitive issue to be dealing with. But here are my final thoughts on just the frequency of obsession in general. And I'm going to double down on this position because I stand by it. Having strong focus, we talked about this in the relationship obsession or the romantic obsession episode that I did a while ago. Having strong focus by itself isn't a problem. The same way being neurotic isn't a problem. It's when you feel out of control, when you do not have a sense of empowerment around something, when you feel powerless to a compulsion, that or an obsession, but that's where things go sideways. Because if you sat around and just daydreamed and imagined all of this money flooding into your life and you did that over and over and over and over and over, that would put you in a great position. Having ultra strong focus puts you in a fantastic position. Or getting into the energy of love, flowing love completely unconditionally, that's a great position to be in. So in many ways, having that strong focus is good. Like there are so many times where I'm like, oh my God, the fact that I can sit here and focus for like a solid hour, 2 hours, it makes me a really strong creator for one. Like when there's something that I want and something that I like and something that I love. But man, it is like I get a death grip on certain things that are not serving me, that do not help, and all of that. So it's a double-edged sword for sure. It's just that you want to understand how to use it. And that is something that obviously we're already at 45 minutes. I can't open up a conversation about every possible thought form. The simple answer is it takes practice. It takes practice for you to understand what thought trains create what type of energetic charge, add up into what type of momentum, and take you into what mental situation. Because that's a question that only you can answer. And you can only get that answer through experience. And you can only get that answer through attention to what you're doing and what you're thinking and what you're experiencing and what takes you where. So it's entirely subjective. That's the other thing that it is, I guess we could say, frustrating, is because it is in many ways a discipline. And like anything else with your mental and emotional bodies, navigating those, that is a skill. And it's something that, when you bring full consciousness, not attention, but consciousness to, right? So that's bringing the God aspect, bringing that into the mix can help loosen things up. But then there's also some human issues require some human tools as well. So in many ways, energetics, of course, are the basis of everything, including this. Of course, there's an energetic basis of this. If we just want to take it plain and simple, if you focus on what you don't want, you're going to feel like shit. So anytime I'm entertaining these stories and obsessions about, oh my God, what if this happens? And then that leads to me not experiencing love. Well, of course, that's going to lead me into some pretty dark places when it comes to frequency. However, prying my eyes away from that situation, like loosening up my grip, that is where we want all of the tools that we can get. I'm saying this if you are prone to that really intense focus. That's where you would want to interject with some tools, with some practical mental body tools, and get really good at them. That way you get to do both. This is the thing, or this is why I love taking a holistic approach to all of these things, is that you get to do what works. And the nice thing is when you're addressing it from both the energetic angle and the practical angle, or like more of those mental body tools or whatever, and you can apply this to anything. You want to tackle the practical and the energetic, because what I've found is sometimes the practical choices or the practical tools will create a bridge where you can get to the energetic piece faster. So for a long time in my love life, I couldn't access the energetics just because my nervous system was too jacked up in order for me to go to a purely energetic place with it. Now, my love life can purely be handled with energetics. That's the basis. As a matter of fact, practicality in many cases would probably poison my approach to my relationship. So I will not even say that anything going on in your life or any type of issue, medical, mental, emotional, whatever, I will not say that it is always going to be a 50-50 practical energetic split. No, it's not. No, it's not. There are different ratios for different situations. Like in my love life, for some time, it was like 95 practical, 5% energetic was all I could handle. So this is where you have to take a look at what you have sitting in front of your face and just ask yourself, be honest, do the practical tools resonate with me more in this moment, or how much of the energetic and how much of the practical is the appropriate ratio for me? For me, it's going to be different in every area of your life. There's going to be different tools for different seasons and different ratios along with the energetics. And this is why I prefer not to speak in absolutes about stuff like this, even though I'm sure many of you would appreciate a how-to. And the how-to, it's like, well, when? The how-to, if you're really advanced, if you're super regulated, if you're in deep practice, if you're in a certain level of mastery, well, then you can start just playing with straight up energetics. You don't even need to worry about the practical stuff. That's like 2% of the game. If you're just starting out, that's going to look different. If you're like me, maybe generally most things are approached through energetics most of the time. That's what's dominant, that's what's easiest, and that's what's best. However, I get this pocket, I get this season of my life that is requiring more of the practical mental body tools to get me to the point where I have more of a sense of confidence around my creatorship and energetics in this area, right? So how I see it is practical things are ultimately a bridge just to get me over into a position where I can solely ride on energetics. Because that is what I prefer to do. That's the most fun. That's the best. That is like the upper crust of how I want to be dealing with my life, how I want to be navigating it. If I had it my way, I would be in the 90% energetics around all things, and there would be a very small fraction. There would be that final 10% of practicality, and that practicality would just be for funsies. It would just add some continuity to the story, and that's all that it would be doing. However, these pockets or seasons, different areas of your life are going to call for different things. And it's okay if they're getting you into the energetic ratio that you prefer. Not everyone likes my energetic ratio. I just like it. So ultimately, you get to decide all of this. So anyway, I've been going on for, oh my God, almost an hour. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Don't forget, I have Cosmic Council coming up soon. The payment plan, the extended payment plan, is going to expire on the 7th. And so if you are needing spaced out payments, I would get on that this week. Apex, the 2-month intensive with me to get yourself into peak emotional, mental, energetic condition, that comes up on October 1st. So applications will close on September 30th or when all seats are filled. So we have a sharp cutoff date because we start a consumption fast on October 1st, and there's a prep call at the end of September right before we start so that you can have all the information, the details, the boundaries, all of that good stuff. So if you want in, go apply. I would love to have you. It is my favorite container, and it changes my life every single time. So I hope to see you there. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much. If you know someone who would find this helpful, please send it to them. And I always appreciate you. I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Time. Bye-bye. Time. Bye-bye. Time. Bye-bye. Time. Bye-bye.